This is HuffPost Third Metric, where we're redefining success beyond money and power. This is what your typical corporate structure looks like. And this is what an organization that uses Holacracy looks like. So what are the risks and benefits of disrupting modern corporate culture? Joining me to discuss are Anna McGrath, co-founder of WonderWorks, and Stephanie Michelle, CEO of Social Bling. So Anna, I want to dive right in and start with you. What is Holacracy?
It's a system that allows people to self-organize. It's really a way to move away from a traditional, very strict hierarchical focus and be able to really support everyone working in their area of strength. So it's a way to do that in a systematic way, as opposed to just creating a fully flat organization that might have issues around accountability and really making sure the work gets done.
And you just mentioned something about a flat organization, and I feel like that's even a little bit of a more recent term in corporate culture, where a lot of organizations tried to institute flat organizations, and it seemed like what was happening was that it was just less people doing more work. What do you think about that type of scenario?
Well, I think that there's a number of things that have happened over the last few years. Taking management out from the point of view of just not having people micromanaging and watching over people do work, I actually think that is a useful shift. But it's not just simply taking people out. It's allowing those people who were in leadership roles, in management roles, to be able to really do the great work that they are talented at doing, not just simply kind of overseeing someone. So one of the things that's happened in the last few years is obviously there's been in the last 5 years, monumental shifts within organizations. And some of those have been more economically driven, i.e. pulling people out and just simply getting them to do more work. But I think from the point of view of with Holocracy, it's really about how do we self-organize? How do you get the people who are truly the most talented at the work, making the decisions and having the level of autonomy to be able to be successful? So flat is great. You've got people making decisions who are actually doing the work. But you do need some level of hierarchy, in my opinion. And there is some level of hierarchy within Holacracy, but it is actually about having the authority to be making decisions about whatever your area of work is.
So rather than a traditional top-down, one person making decisions at the top and it funneling down, a few key leaders are making decisions.
Well, in Holocracy, everyone is making decisions. Every single person is the decision maker for their roles. So, for example, depending on what my role is, if I'm in marketing, if I'm in charge of a website, I'm making decisions about that website. If I'm actually doing, if I'm actually in a department of operations, I'm actually making those decisions. I'm not actually going up to somebody else to decide how am I going to be processing my payroll. I'm actually making those decisions at my level. Now, as you scale in an organization, certain decisions have to be centralized. And so the people who are in charge of other more broader roles will certainly still have broader decision-making authorities, but everybody is making decisions.
I see. And Stephanie, you also have kind of disrupted the model of a top-down culture. Explain to us a little bit about the model that you've developed.
Sure. So where it's similar to Holacracy is we do believe that there are people in positions that have great ideas and have strengths and they're not being utilized, and we want to bring them into the light. We want to make sure that they are presenting their strengths within the organization. Where it's different is we don't go directly to a decision-making model. We really look at what is happening in terms of influence and where people are being influenced in the marketplace and even within their own organization, like how are they getting information? How are they communicating? And we address that first before we create decision-making roles. So we're really looking at how are people communicating and can we elevate that process where they're working better just by going through more of a structured dialogue to pull out both opportunities and blind spots.
So in this situation, are you also empowering all of your employees in various ways, or is there still a few key decision makers?
Absolutely. I mean, we really take a look at who the individual is first, and there's all kinds of interests that people have that an employer never gets to know the employee, never gets to know them by these interests, and yet they could be utilized in different parts of the organization to innovate, and to think a problem through or present a different view or different perception of that problem, but that nobody's ever thought of. So we actually start the process not by saying, hey, let's look overall how we're going to shift the organization. We actually look at every individual, and then we put them in small groups based on who they are and assign them a very specific role in a conversation process as a part to the decision making. But we don't start by just giving them new roles of decision making. We first want to see how are they influenced, and maybe we'll move them into different projects after we see that.
And how does trust play a role when you're empowering more employees at various levels like that?
Huge. Trust plays a huge role. So you hear all the statistics about how disengaged the workforce is, and so when we talk about any process, any change that we're going to do within an organization, the leader needs to be trusted, right? We can't just go in and say, here's a process that we're going to go through. If there's not leadership trust, we call it relational SPF. We have to have this relationship with the leaders where we know we can speak up. There's some level of predictability and there's some fairness. So we have to see if that's in the process first. And if it's not, we're going to do some things to pull it out. And mostly, what we do to pull out is we involve everybody in the decision making of what the process is going to be before we roll it out.
So Anna, I just want to turn back to you because it almost seems as though there's no real boss when everybody kind of becomes the king of their own castle. So where does the buck stop? Who is ultimately responsible in an organization when there is no boss at the top?
Yeah, so what I would say is I don't see it as a boss at the top. However, as I say, there still is a hierarchy at play within Holacracy. And so what I would look at is when we initially implement, we'll be looking at that hierarchical, that organizational chart. And we're not throwing that out the window and totally dismissing it day one. It's really about saying, how can we use this structure and how can we evolve and iterate it forward? So to directly answer your question, there is still what we call a lead link, who is normally the existing CEO or executive director, whatever the business model is. Normally that person takes on the lead link role of what I would call this broader general company circle. And that the only difference, say, between a CEO role and a lead link role, or the major difference is a lead link only has three responsibilities. They assign roles, they prioritize the work of their group, their circle, and they also allocate resources. Now, any other talents, because we know many different CEOs, some of them are brilliant public speakers. Some of them are very strategically minded. Some have a great sales focus. So instead of actually giving them this great big glommed together job description, which is this is a CEO role, what we do is we're breaking out chunks of work so that the entire company is just filled with a number of roles, these chunks of work that get put together like Lego. So every CEO is going to be very different. Every role, every holocratic organization is going to look very different. But you will have this lead link in charge of each circle, in charge of each group. And I use the word in charge of the role of lead link, these three responsibilities: prioritization, assigning roles, and resource allocation. So that allows strategy to flow through the organization. That allows metrics and accountability to flow through the organization.
So I totally get the idea of customizing roles based on what people are good at. But in a situation like that, who gets to decide who's good and who's bad, and then what to do about it?
Yeah. And so firstly, who gets to decide on what the roles are? It would be the specific circle of people who were focused on that area of work. So the marketing circle, if there was one, it could be many, but they would get to decide on what roles needed to be filled. And then the lead link would fill those roles. Now, who gets to decide what's good or bad? The way that the driving force within Holacracy is this idea of being able to, A, have everyone sense tensions. And what I mean by attention is it's the gap between what is right now, current reality, and a future potential. And so with everyone sensing into attention, there are certain types of meetings, as well as outside meetings, that you can process tensions easily and reliably into meaningful change. So what that means is everyone gets to decide within the context of their role what is attention, what is a gap between where we could be and how fabulous we could be doing this work or the results that we could be achieving. So the difference I love with Holocracy is everyone gets to process tensions to really grow the organization in the direction that it really needs to go. So it's not one person or a very small group of people deciding where this organization goes. It becomes much more organic, where the entire organization is involved in what really works, what doesn't work. And now let's go ahead and say, what do we need to resolve this tension? And everyone gets that level of taking 100% responsibility, that level of engagement, and that level of truly doing the work that's needed to actually fulfill your purpose.
So Stephanie, Anna was just referring to tensions, and I'd like to get your perspective because with technology these days, you don't necessarily need to be in the office all the time. So I'm wondering how working remotely kind of impacts the corporate structure as you've developed it.
Right. Well, I want to address just the process of revealing attention in Holacracy before we talk remote, because my challenge with this is, yes, everybody might see attention, but how do they present it in the Holacracy model where everybody else can also add their perception to that tension? And how do you know that just because you've seen something, you've observed a problem, that when you bring it up in a governance meeting, and correct me if I'm wrong if that's what that's called, but how do you know that once it's on the agenda, that's going to stay on the agenda and there's actually going to be some focus on it? Because I see that like everybody has an opportunity to bring it up, but maybe other people don't perceive it as a problem, and it quickly becomes something that nobody decides to move forward on it and address. Can you? And I'd like to hear more about how revealing the tension works in the Holacracy model.
Yeah, well, just to take before we go back to remote, I think just to take a moment on that, there are a number of types of tension. So some tensions are operational in a tactical way, but what you're referring to, Stephanie, is the tensions that relate to who gets to decide what. That's a governance tension. And so within a governance meeting, one of the things that I do, to address some of what I think you're talking about here, which is it's one tension at a time sensed by one person. So it's not us saying, oh, how do the five of us feel about this one tension? It's how do we resolve one person's tension and then iterate forward. We've all been in those meetings where it takes 3 hours to debate something and there's no movement forward.
Right.
What I find governance meetings is that once people get actually trained so they're actually effective in the process, they actually move fast. And so I resolve my tension, we move on, somebody else resolves theirs, and we move on. And the other thing is, not to get too technical, but also we do a lot of governance, i.e. who gets to make what decision, over email. And so you don't even need to have a meeting for it if it's not that technical. It's just when it's a big, juicy issue, we have a governance process to actually, and I think that we have an objection process, which is a little bit a longer process to explain, but lots of resource to actually support people to get to know what that means more. But I'll pass it back over to you and see where you want to go with that.
Anna and Stephanie, we love the lively discussion going on here, and I can see our community is really, really interested in this discussion. So I hope that you'll join us again so that we can continue this discussion. I know there's a lot more to discuss. For now, I want to thank both of you for joining us.